Been saying that if the United States and or Israel go to war against Iran, Brent crude is going to spike to well above $100 a barrel. But the 21st century is going to be the Chinese century, because the business of America, by the facts, is war. Going back to Buffett, it's the death of the dollar. America's become the country our founding fathers fought against. Look at the debt level that we have. Where they're saying now it's, to the debt to GDP level is like 100, over 100. And you go back a decade ago, it was half of that. And so when I say what our founding fathers fought against, once upon a time, there was this place called Great Britain, where the sun never sets on the British Empire, where they're slaughtering people all over the world, right? War after war after war after war after war. So what happened after World War I? Pound went down and the dollar went up because of all the wars that they fought. America is now in that same position. One of my sayings is that the 20th century was the American century, but the 21st century is going to be the Chinese century, because the business of America, by the facts, is war. But again, we're going back to the Middle East. They were having a rough time already. Let's go back to oil prices. One of the reasons why Brent crude was so low back then, there was more supply than demand, and OPEC Plus was pushing out more than they should have been pushing out because they needed the dough. I've been saying that if the United States and or Israel go to war against Iran, Brent crude is going to spike to well above $100 a barrel, and it's going to crash the global equity markets and the global economy. We've been saying this for decades in the magazine over and over and over again. We are at that point. And we say there's no way that either the United States or Israel is going to defeat Iran. These are the Persians. They are very advanced scientifically, technologically, and militarily. And again, as you know, I launched a movement called Occupy Peace at peace rallies every year. So I put my money where my heart is. And you go back to the facts. America has not won a war since World War II. And they would not have won that one. They hate me for saying this. So this is very serious. This war, the damage it's done is incalculable. And the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get.
When you zoom out, this isn't a geopolitical opinion. It is a monetary history lesson playing on repeat. The British pound lost reserve currency status after a century of imperial overextension and war debt, and that transition happened faster, more violently, and more completely than most market participants had priced in. Gerald Celente has been tracking this structural parallel for decades, and what he is describing is not prediction. It is pattern recognition applied to a debt-to-GDP ratio that has moved from roughly 55% to well above 100% in under 15 years. Listen to where he anchors the core trade.
I want to circle back on one question I had for you, but let me just stay on this Buffett issue because there's a few other points I wanted to get in. He mentioned how he felt better when Volcker was there. He was asked about the current Fed chair. He said he sleeps better with Powell in place, praising a steady hand against inflation, but he did prefer Volcker, and I guess he was implying he's concerned about the new incoming chair. You've been critical of central bank policies for years. So how do you compare Volcker's era and approach to today's Fed environment?
Again, it's a different time.
Yeah.
It's a different time. You go back, I started buying gold. By the way, one of my books, this was it back in the 1980s, Trend Tracking, far better than Megatrends Time magazine. I started buying gold when the Iran conflict started breaking out in the late 1970s.
Right.
Go look what interest rates were back then. Like 8, 10%, 12% in 1980. And then when Volcker came in, he wrapped them up higher. So interest rate, what are they now? We're talking 3.5, 3.75. We're talking back then, before Volcker came, before Reagan won. By the way, I have a picture.
I was going to say, I could never forget that time because, as you know, I was fully pregnant, giving birth in the midst of COVID. Borders were closed. So my family from Canada, my mom, dad, my family, which was supposed to be the most, glorious moment of my life to present my children, my twins, and they were denied that. Right. And I didn't get to have that. So, and that's just, one example of what they robbed us of.
Again, again, going back to what he's saying about inflation and why he wants Volcker to bring down, put up interest rates to slow down the economy. It's already slowed down for the average people.
Yeah.
And how many hundreds of billions is Buffett worth? And not a penny, by the way, for peace. Any of these clown boys and girls called billionaires.
Well, that's the other thing, is like he's poo-pooing cash, right? But he also mentioned that they're sitting on a huge cash hoard because the environment isn't ideal for deploying it, right? He doesn't, you know what he's said about gold in the past. So, I mean, look, what should Americans be doing right now? I know you believe in gold, but what's the greatest hedge against the death of the dollar?
The gold and then silver, and it's no question about it. If they were Italian, you'd call them a mafia for all the people that they slaughtered. So let's go back to Iran. 1953, they threw out the Shah's old man, and they democratically elected a guy by the name of Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh had the nerve, the gall to say, the oil in Iran does not belong to Anglo-Iranian Oil, better known today as BP, or Standard Oil, better known today as ExxonMobil. It belongs to the Iranian people. No, it doesn't. They did not release the data, the official data, until around 2013. Remember, this happens 1953. That little clown boy who smokes cigars that looks like a fat little slob that everybody looks up to, Winston Churchill. Yeah, that jerk who gave us World War I and World War II. Telegrams from him to Kermit Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt's grandson, that we have to take that oil back. They overthrew the government of Mossadegh. They brought in the Savak, the secret police that made the SS look good. It was a crime syndicate running Iran under the Shah. I became a political atheist.
You know, her father's a professor. Okay,
I mean,
fine.
But nobody ever heard of him. But the point that I'm making, it's up to we the people to change it. That's what I'm saying. We have to bring in a new third party, as I see it. I call what they call the government, I call it a crime syndicate. Both of them. I mentioned under the Obama administration, $29 trillion to bail out the banksters that caused the problem. War after war, both parties. We need a new third party. That's the way I see it. But I only brought up Mandani, not, again, as I said, not you like, don't like.
This isn't a bear case. It is the bear case, the one that has a 7-0-year historical precedent in Britain's post-war sterling collapse. Celente's 1,979 Iran entry into gold was not speculative. It was a response to a specific, measurable condition: geopolitical shock compressing an already distorted energy market. That same condition, OPEC supply pressure, a Middle East flashpoint, and a Federal Reserve that cannot replicate Volcker's rate path without triggering a sovereign debt crisis, is now aligned simultaneously. The difference today is that the starting debt load is structurally incompatible with a Volcker-style response. The dollar's reserve status is not collapsing overnight. It is eroding by design, war spending, debt monetization, and geopolitical realignment compounding across decades. The 1944 Bretton Woods architecture gave the dollar its throne. The Nixon shock of 1971 removed its floor. What Celente is describing is the third phase, the slow-motion exit by sovereign creditors who no longer need to hold dollars to settle energy trades. Gold and silver are not speculative positions in this environment. They are the only assets with a 5,000-year record of surviving currency transitions intact. The real risk is not holding gold when it moves. It is holding dollar-denominated paper when the next phase of this transition accelerates, fast, institutional, and without warning.